Why do games get remastered, and what are the issues involved with bringing games back to life? If you haven't already heard, Blizzard announced this weekend that the remaster for the original Starcraft and its better half, Brood Wars, is on the way. It's quite honestly a shock. We all know that Blizzard is a very slow-moving company. They don't like to change their games, and they certainly don't like to remaster them. So why is this nearly 20-year-old game getting a remaster? Frank Pierce of Blizzard once said, "We had some dedicated folks who were passionate about the idea to dig up the Warcraft 1 assets and code. They got it working, and they got it running in a window, and I played it. Warcraft Orcs and Humans was fun for its time, I promise you, but in today's world, by today's standards, it's just not that fun anymore." So obviously what Frank is saying is that you can't just bring back games from the dead. They have to be fun today by today's standards. And that's going to be the subject for today's video, the relevancy of remasters. People want remasters so they can re-experience their favorite games, with improvements that new technology can provide. Now those tech improvements usually come in the form of better graphics or higher fidelity, maybe improved audio, a retooled user interface, or a higher frame rate. Depending on how severe the rework is, these small adjustments can often make a huge impact on our games, and they add up really quickly. When Sony remastered The Last of Us with Naughty Dog, Joel and Ellie became playable in beautiful 1080p 60 frames per second. It essentially changed the game. And it provided a much more refined and immersive experience. It's definitely the preferred way to play the game, no doubt about it. Other games can be remastered for the sake of preservation, as seen with the recent overhaul of Grim Fandango. No longer do people have to scavenge their way around eBay and used game sites to find a physical copy of this game. All they have to do now is to head to Steam and download it instantly. Remasters can also be full of feature ads for games as well. We need only to look at GTA 5, a wonderful game made even better by adding an optional first-person mode which showed players a new and more intimate side to Los Santos than the game was inherently capable of. But there is a problem that remasters often face. A remaster assumes that the players of the current generation want the base game mechanics intact, the way they were prior when the game was initially released. Unlike remakes, which are games that receive overhauls of major systems and mechanics in hopes of modernizing it for the current gen, think about the huge changes coming to Square's remake of Final Fantasy VII for instance, remasters usually don't make any changes to the base game at all. This is because often, publishers have to tread a very fine line. Is improving the performance and fidelity of the game enough to win over players, old and new? Do they really want 10-year-old or 20-year-old gameplay mechanics, clunky and outdated user interfaces and combat systems, or archaic gameplay elements that have been so religiously improved upon since? Many players often reminisce about their old favorite games, including myself sometimes, letting those warm fuzzy feelings of nostalgia blind us to how we truly feel about the game today. This group of people is the dedicated fanbase, and they must be considered because they don't want change. They want everything exactly how it was. But I would argue that games do need to change to suit the time period they are released in. And so we land at the topic at hand, Starcraft. Brood Wars is a very challenging game to play. While the campaign was great, most serious Starcraft players play Brood Wars for the competitive multiplayer. The original Starcraft was not an introductory type game. It was a fast and vicious game with an unfriendly UI and a learning curve steeper than Mount Everest. Simple things that we take for granted now, like being able to set multiple buildings to a single hotkey and the indicator in StarCraft 2 that shows idle workers, were absent in Brood Wars. Battle.net was testy as well, and it was often very difficult to get into a fair match. But nonetheless, StarCraft took off and was very well received, especially in South Korea, where Brood Wars became the national symbol for competitive esports. Not only is it an official occupation, but South Korea is also the most voracious gaming epicenter that no other country can match in its devotion and passion to a game. It's an attachment rarely, if ever seen, to a single game by any group of people. A staggering 120,000 people gathered in a stadium in Korea to watch the 2005 Starcraft World Championship after all. You'd be very surprised then to discover that many South Korean Starcraft players don't like Starcraft 2. The fact that they are so dedicated to Brood Wars that no other game needs consideration is testament to their unwavering love of the original game. But Starcraft 2 is where the money is, and many of those professional Starcraft players now resign themselves to playing the sequel out of sheer necessity to make money. And let's be frank here, Starcraft 2 is struggling. Simply watching these Starcraft 2 tournaments or esports events, from the pro circuit all the way down to when the IPL Pro League laid off a bunch of its casters in its San Francisco office a few years back, viewership is often extremely low. And let's be honest, Blizzard does not like to make changes to their games. They are a company founded on quality, and they like to take their sweet time when making decisions, especially ones that have big impacts on the games they've already released. Just as a reference point, Diablo 3 was released in May of 2012, and people banded together to beg and plead that the Real Money auction house be taken down as it basically ruined the game. Blizzard was silent for months upon months and finally took it down in March of 2014, nearly 2 years later. But this extreme delay and inflexibility also currently applies to Hearthstone. Blizzard lags behind usually an entire expansion before buffing or nerfing cards that need to be. So combine that design philosophy with how people feel about remasters and the state of Starcraft 2, and we have a very interesting debate on our hands. I believe Starcraft is being remastered because Blizzard understands that they can no longer win people over with Starcraft 2. They know that the game is in decline, and that the South Korean esports scene will most certainly embrace the remaster of Starcraft with open arms and boost the profitability of the Starcraft 1 esports scene in Korea. I'm sure that Blizzard has been working on the remaster for Starcraft for at least a couple years now, and that's a long time and a lot of people and a ton of resources that could have been used to help develop Starcraft 3. With its old design and encumbering gameplay, I think a lot of average would-be Starcrafters may be in for a wake-up call when they pick up the remaster of Brood Wars this summer. It was a great game for its time, don't get me wrong, and while Starcraft 2 wasn't the game many of us thought it would be, it streamlined the franchise and added a lot of quality of life changes that will not be present in the remaster of Brood Wars. It's an old game sitting in an older time for an older generation. But I've got some questions for you guys. Would we all rather that Blizzard instead have poured its time into working on StarCraft 3? Or is a remaster for Diablo 2 even worth it, considering Diablo 4 could be that much more of a game if they focused all of their attention on it? Let me know what you guys think of remasters. I think there's a lot more to talk about, so help me facilitate more discussion down below. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, by all means hit the thumbs up button and subscribe here for more of our future content, and have yourself a kick-ass day, guys.